Welcome back to the podcast Conversations and Connections. I'm your host, Sandy McGregor, and I'm so excited to bring faith stories to you and recognize the goodness of God in our lives. And today we are doing the exact same thing. We have an incredible couple. We have SQuire and Louise Rushnell with us today. And I'm so excited to introduce everybody to this amazing couple. If you've heard of the term Godwink series, or their award-winning their books. I think you have the 13th now is the Godwinks for Moms that we'll talk about today, or the ABC After School special, or Schoolhouse Rock, which is close to my heart because I remember those. So people in my generation will probably think, "Oh, I know what you're talking about, Sandy." And
That's
also,
great.
people will know Louise from stage for your incredible impressions and your comedian expertise. So I know that people will go, "Oh, I know who this couple is. This is so great." So
Boy,
thank
they've aged so much since I saw
Not at
them
all.
once.
But we're so excited. I love it. I love it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Well,
We're thrilled to
great.
be here.
Yeah.
You know, I love that you prayed before we got on the air, and it's so important. You know, as Squire and I pray every day.
Yeah.
And we were thinking this morning about how Jesus did nothing without
Right.
praying first.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Absolutely.
We should always pray about everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And I love one of the things I just love about you that I've been learning, and is just your heart for marriages and your heart for praying. And we're going to talk about the pray together, stay together, your
Great.
40-day journey. We'll get into that because I
Great.
think
Thank you.
couples today, I think we just get so busy, right? And we forget how
Absolutely.
important it is.
Yeah.
So yeah. So actually, you know what? Just because we're talking a little bit about that, what started with that whole pray together moment? Just because I was even with my husband, we have this routine, and we have our breakfast together in the morning, a coffee, he has a tea, and I know that you do something similar too. And I
Yeah.
thought, I know we weren't necessarily going to start with this, but maybe just share a little bit about that.
Yeah.
We started very early in our marriage, about 25 years ago, maybe a little longer now.
Mhm.
And we started with two things that were very, very important to every single day.
Mm.
We started with my bringing my wife a bagel and coffee no later than 7 a.m. And then at that boardroom table with the two of us and God, we would also do our morning prayers.
Love
And
it.
so those two factors are part of our lives. And it doesn't matter if we are off at Motel 6 somewhere, I will find the bagel, I'll find the coffee. We'll be back and we'll be able to have our board meeting in the morning and have
Love it.
this conversation with God.
And you know, Sandy, the way it started originally was Squire had been married twice before. I'm Mrs. Rushnell III. And I was married for 20 years before.
Mhm.
And we never prayed with our spouse.
No.
Mm.
And when we got together, when we started praying, it was totally different.
Yeah.
The marriage was
really is.
totally different.
Yeah.
It really was three as one. That
Amazing.
the chords, that chord with Christ in the center.
Mhm.
We started seeing things happen in our lives that were supernatural.
Absolutely.
And we wanted to share it with other people. And that's how it really started.
and
We
every
wanted to
time-
share the gift.
And we'd talk to people over dinner and so forth, and they'd say, "Well, oh, really? Yeah. How do you do it?
Right.
What do you do?" And then we'd go to churches, and people would say, "Well, how do you do it?" And we'd realize that this was a really sincere question. That
Truly.
our culture does not teach husbands and wives pray together.
Yeah.
I mean, we all pray grace. We all pray in together
Right.
with family issues and at church and so on and so forth. But I'm talking about a conversation between a man and a woman and God
Yeah.
for as little as 5 minutes a day. And amazing things happen when you do it. And so when we wrote our first book, which was Couples Who Pray, the most intimate act between a man and a woman,
Yeah. Yeah.
we talked about this wonder of the experience that we had in just praying together, the amount of time it takes to drink a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Now, I know we all say, oh gosh, we get too busy. Well,
Yeah.
wait a minute. How
Yeah.
busy is a cup of coffee?
It's
How
not.
busy is that? Okay.
It's critical.
That's right.
and so when we put it into this simple kind of nomenclature that we like to use because we are simple people, Schoolhouse Rock,
I love it.
the lady who brings you funny voices, we're simple people. And so we like to put this into a simple context so that it is so easy. And so out of our quest to do that in this first book, Couples Who Pray, we came up with the idea of a scaffolding to give people a challenge and a scaffolding
Yes.
to pray together,
Yeah.
2 people, 5 minutes a day for 40 days.
Yeah.
Why 40 days? Well, it's a biblical.
It is a biblical thing.
A lot of things in the Bible happen for 40 days,
Yeah.
basically 6 weeks. And it also assures that if you're starting a new habit, that habit is going to be pretty much formed at the end of
For
6
sure.
weeks.
Yeah.
And at
you
that
miss it.
point,
Yes.
we will admit that it's been a bit of a con job. We didn't really mean 40 days. What we meant is you get the habit in 40 days, and now you're on your own,
Yeah.
and we want you to keep
Going.
on going.
Don't
Because
stop.
if everything is as we say it is, that romance goes up by 21%. Are you hearing me, men? If delight goes up 30%, if
Yeah.
arguments go down, if the fear of divorce goes to 0, why would you want to stop at 40 days when
Absolutely.
it only takes 5 minutes a day?
Wow. It's amazing. Fitting that 5 minutes in, we can do it, but we have to choose to do it. And I think that
That's exactly right.
we can get lazy, and it can
Yeah.
be easy to just say, oh, I'm tired, I'm grumpy, I'm just gonna have my coffee and get on with my day. And it's funny you talk about the coffee thing, because that's what my dad has done for my mom forever. And they're now 86, 85. And they have also done this praying thing for their entire marriage. And so I have this gift of being able to watch this legacy in front of me and with my siblings and now the grandkids, that they watch this couple do what you're expecting others to hopefully
That's
do, is
great.
to have a coffee, serve one another, and pray together. What a
Yeah.
gift.
And when we wrote the book, Couples Who Pray, the most intimate act between a man and a woman, we said, okay, so how do we get people to read that? So we said, we'll get some shiny objects like some celebrities.
Right.
So we got some celebrities in there, but somehow, some way, Denzel Washington's wife, Pauletta Washington, found out we were writing this book.
Yeah.
And she called us and said, I want to be a part of it. And because of what you said, Sandy, is exactly what she said. She said, when I was a kid growing up, I saw my parents praying.
Yeah.
And it profoundly touched my life.
Yeah, for sure.
And when I got married to Denzel, I said, we've got to pray together. And they've been married, 35 years, I guess,
Wow.
maybe. But again, it's when you see your parents doing that, it's a legacy that you pass on. And that's one of the things we talk about. It doesn't just help your marriage, because it does tremendous things in your marriage. But what it does is it secures your family. It gives your family such a strong foundation. And the kids then will emulate that. They'll see their parents praying and they'll want to do it.
They'll also see the outcome. We were invited to one of the big churches that had been taking the Couples Who Pray study group and it was like one of the biggest small group churches in the United States, in Birmingham. And they invited us to come and hear what couples had experienced. So we happened to be in the area and we said, oh, that'd be fun. So they got us into this big place and they gave us a couple of director's chair, or actually they were kind of bar stools. So we were much higher, and there were 70 people there. So that's like 35 couples. Yeah. And they had a couple of microphones, and people one by one or two by two would come up to the microphone and do their testimonies as to what happened when they prayed.
Really? What a night.
Yeah. Okay. And we sat there and just cried our eyes out.
Did. We did.
Marriage is restored, like those stories like that. Yeah.
But the one thing that we both remembered the most were 2 couples that had said basically the same thing. That once they started praying together, after a week or two, one of the kids would come up and say, "What happened to you, Dad? What's going on? You're not arguing anymore.
Yeah.
Or why are you so happy?"
Yeah.
You know? And
Wow.
they really saw that that was like the pay dirt.
Mhm.
That's what we're working
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right
And,
there.
you know, the other thing is that people love scientific evidence. You know, we hear so much about the science, the science.
Yeah.
And so when we started going out to churches and seeing the supernatural effect of a couple praying together simply 5 minutes a day for 40 days,
Yeah.
we said there's got to be statistics about this. This has to be research.
Right.
So we went to George Barna, and Squire asked him, he said, "Is there research about couples praying consistently?"
Mhm.
And he said, "No, I don't have any research on that." And
Really?
Squire said,
Yeah.
"Why not?" He said, "Well, no one ever asked me."
Well, I'll ask.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then we found ourselves at Baylor University. They do
Wow.
all the big like Newsweek and
Time magazine covers those research
Mhm.
projects.
Yes.
Make the covers.
And
Yeah.
we went to them and they said, "We've never done any research about that either, but
Mhm.
we'll join you." So
Wow.
we are doing with them the first empirical study of what happens when couples pray together consistently.
Yeah.
Now we have some of the preliminary stats
Mhm.
that will, like you said,
Yeah.
some of the things you just mentioned
Yeah.
were in the
It's
stats.
just extraordinary.
It's extraordinary.
And we think the stats are going to be better than that.
Yes.
And what we
We're
want to do
excited.
is get to that point where we have, 7 or 8,000 couples
Mhm.
with stats,
Mhm.
and that would be really a great foundation of
Mhm.
research.
Absolutely.
And so we're hoping that will take place within the next year because
Mhm. Yeah.
we're planning to develop this television
Yeah.
series called Pray Stay Challenge.
Oh, I
A
love that.
reality show, Sandy,
Yeah.
but not like the Housewives of New Jersey. It'll be
A little
it'll be
different.
the opposite of that. It'll the housewives praying
Yeah.
in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So
Oh,
what
it's
this is-
great. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. So this reality series will be following 6 couples. All of them have got struggling issues that they have that are common to
Mhm.
almost everybody.
Right.
Some of them worse than others. Where and people at home will start, as they do in a reality show. You kind of pick your favorite couples and
Yeah.
how are they going to
Yeah.
get out of this situation and so forth.
Yeah.
And all they have is 5 minutes of prayer a day
Mhm.
as their greatest tool
Mhm.
to fix this marriage
Mhm.
that the
Prayer
world is
changes
coming
everything.
off.
It changes
It
everything.
really
And-
does.
And
Mhm.
it will, and here's the most wonderful thing. People will be entertained by this. There's never been a show like this on
No.
television before.
Mhm.
Reality shows usually aren't real. And so
They are.
they kind of make them up and script them a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
These are real. These are authentic couples.
Mhm.
And there's nothing made up in this series. And so, what is going to happen is that people at home are going to see how easy it is.
Yes.
Now, there is a
Mhm.
pattern that has followed. Women are always the leaders. That happens when toddlers are wandering around. Little girls walk before
Mhm.
boys do. Little girls are leaders, and little boys they spend too much time analyzing things and so on and so forth. And with partner prayer, we have found that it is always the wife who is leading the way, and the guys are kind of hanging back, saying, I don't know, as I want to
Yeah.
be that vulnerable. This is kind of like walking into an X-ray machine. I don't know, because I want to be seen from the inside out and all that.
Yeah.
So there's a nervousness there.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
they think that we're asking them to cross the Golden Gate Bridge or the Thousand Island Bridge to Canada and America on your hands and knees. But once you put one foot on that
Mhm.
bridge, God takes over
Yes.
and he turns it into a footpath.
Mhm.
It is so easy.
Mhm.
And the vulnerability,
Mhm.
fear begins to evaporate.
Mhm.
And then the fear of being able to say things that might not be macho like us men like to be, that we might seem like we're subservient or all those kinds of things. And then what happens is that the woman realizes that she's seeing into his heart.
Yeah. And, intimacy is really into me, see. And so often women will say, when my husband and I pray, I saw the heart of my husband and I was more attracted to him.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
Hence that 21% stat, folks. Okay.
But I love the authenticity in the Godwink series. And so the one that you just recently did, Godwinks for Mom, I actually got it on audio so I could just listen to it because I love driving around and listening to it. And the stories are so incredible. And I know this is why you're doing so well, because it's real and relatable. And people love to hear these stories where there's a divine component to it. These things just don't randomly happen. But I'd love if you'd share a little bit about where the term Godwink started and kind of what has been your hope through this whole Godwink series and the Hallmark movie and the Rescue by Ruby, which I love that movie.
Yeah.
It just made me so emotional. It was so beautiful. My girls are going to watch it, and I've been telling them all about it. But yes, I'd love to hear a little bit about that. If you could share that with us today.
Well, I was always fascinated with coincidence. And when I ran Good Morning America, I would stand in the back of the control room, and I was always kind of listening for those reporters who would say, "Ironically today," and I'd perk up my ears and say, maybe it's one of those coincidence things.
Right.
And as we started talking about this, Louise and I, to other people, we'd ask them for their coincidence stories, and they would say, well, what do you call a coincidence that isn't a coincidence?
Right.
And that kept coming up. And so then we started realizing, well, there must be something here that we need to come up with a new name for this. Right. And so we started talking to everybody that we could talk to for a period of about 6 months. And we said, what do you call a coincidence that isn't a coincidence? We'd start the conversation that way. And pretty soon just came into mind. We know where it came from. It would have come right from heaven. Godwink floated into mind. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a fun little word. Because when you've been in television and you're a faith person, you always got to be right on the edge there. You got to be right on the line. Not too much here, not too much there. And so I was always partial to words that were not too churchy, not too scary in that regard. And so I thought, Godwink, that doesn't sound threatening to me. And so anyway, we started playing with that word. And what we did is we took the first manuscript that we had already written, had a publisher for, and we took all the coincidence words out, we put in all the Godwink words, and they seemed to fit. But the real test was when people read it.
Right.
And they started using it instantly in their language.
Right.
And we started realizing, my goodness, this is another word. This is a different word. Up to that time, we had never looked up coincidence in the dictionary. I mean, why would you look up a word you already know the answer to? You already know what coincidence means. Well, I didn't know that. Because if you look up coincidence, it says two remarkable events that come together without apparent cause.
Right.
Well, that's not a Godwink. A Godwink are two remarkable things that come together with a cause, and that cause is divine.
Absolutely.
So that is how the word got into the language. And we've had 13 books and 4 Hallmark movies, all a Godwink Christmas, so you don't forget the name.
Yeah.
And
there is no word in the Hebrew language for coincidence.
Yeah.
Because if God is sovereign, then there's no happenstance. There's no coincidence.
Right.
He's the beginning and he's the end.
Yeah.
And so he's the great I am. So he knows everything. So there's nothing that's a surprise, a coincidence.
Nothing surprises.
No.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you could maybe briefly share, both of you, a little bit of your faith stories. So, how did you come to know the Lord? Was this something that happened early in your childhood or in your teen, 20s, 30s? When did it begin for you? Maybe, Louise, you can start with what is your journey to faith?
Well, it's interesting because I was saying I was married before for 20 years. I accepted the Lord in my life a year after I was married. And it I knew right away that my husband there was something off. I didn't know he had a little bit of a drug problem. He had other things going on, and I needed a handrail on a shaky staircase. And people kept coming up to me and talking about, you need Christ in your life. You need Jesus in your life. And I was brought up Catholic, and I said, hey, I'm Catholic. It's like, yeah, right. That's our guy. That's our guy in the cross there. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. And then I got so depressed and down that I said, God, please, if you're real, make yourself known to me.
Yes.
And then my sister-in-law came by and she said to me, Louise, you need Jesus in your life. And so I said, okay, I guess I do. So I accept the Lord. The next day it was a charismatic Catholic church. So we stayed within the realm of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And I had a growth on my ring finger, and it was pretty large. And I go there with my sister-in-law, and there was Father Lou Gavoni. He looked like Dustin Hoffman, and he was saying, there's people being healed. It's not me. Jesus is healing people. And he took go over here and go over. And he said, there's someone who just accepted Christ in their life, and they have a lump on their right hand, the ring finger, and God wants to heal that, and he wants to show you that he does miracles, and he wants you to remember that he did a miracle. You're going to feel a heat going through your hand, and you're going to see that disappear. Just claim it in the name of the Lord. And I looked at my sister-in-law. I thought, what does that even mean? Claim it in the name of the Lord.
I don't know what to do.
So all of a sudden, I felt this heat going through my hand, and that lump disappeared.
Louise, that's unbelievable. I mean,
it was a miracle,
but it's unbelievable at the same time.
It was a miracle. It was a miracle.
Absolute miracle.
And I can't tell you how many times the Lord has brought that to mind. Remember what I did for you, because God knew I was going to go then through a bumpy road.
Yeah.
And so, and I won't go into that's how I accepted Christ. I can tell you later if you want to hear how my whole life changed through an amazing Godwink, how I became an entertainer, but that's a whole nother story.
Well, we can get to that, because I do want to talk about that, because I know that there's a great story to how you ended up getting onto stage, and then Tim Conway and Harvey Korman, and your inspiration with Carol Burnett, and
all the Godwinks,
Godwink.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But we'll get to that. So maybe we can, Squire, talk a little bit about you. What is your story?
I grew up in a little town, kind of a one-horse town. Actually, it's a lie, because I think there were three. But we were 25 miles from the Canadian border, Thousand Island Bridge, and so it was up there in the snow belt on the near the Lake Ontario, and I had a paper route at the age of 9, and so my memory takes me back, and I always believed that there was somebody up there who was looking over me. Now, part of that is thanks to my mom. She made sure I went to church every Sunday, and that I paid for the offering from my own paper route money. And and so but she never took me to church, and I never had that conversation with her. I wish I did, and I will when we get together again. But I went into life with kind of a set of rules that because I started, once I got out of Adams Center, I kind of moved to a lot of different places, went to a lot of different churches. I went to churches because they look pretty, or something else, there really was no rhyme or reason. And so I felt as though I was kind of, if I were to describe religion in my life, it would have been like the Necco wafers, a lot of different colors in there in those Necco wafers. And so I was, if somebody asked me my religion, I'd say, well, I'm kind of a Necco wafer.
Name brand him.
Well, and so, but what happened is that when I met Louise, my life, my spiritual life was born, because this is a woman who I was fascinated with, that when we went to dinner, and she does it all the time now, but then it was very different. Here we are at dinner, and she's just telling a story, a Hollywood story, something like that. She's throwing scripture into the story.
Right.
It's kind of just a sentence
Yes.
in the story. And it was kind of, I thought, gee, that's really a beautiful way to use the testimony of the Bible.
Right.
And I had never read the Bible. I had gone to it for research. I'd look it up. I need to know that David story, because I was in charge of children's television at ABC. So I'd read that and, and stuff like that. I had never really read the Bible. So it wasn't until Louise and I came together that I read the book, the manual, and we started, and I started asking her a lot of questions, and she really was my spiritual guide.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a natural path when we started to pray together. And when that idea came into mind, just to go back and wrap that up with the original conversation about that, is that it seemed like such a neat idea. I had 2 failed marriages, remember? And it was such a neat idea that I had never thought of that before, that husbands and wives would pray together. And what we have found is that as we've been on this journey now for over 15 years, we go to churches, big mega churches, small churches, and what we soon realize is that many pastors don't pray together with their spouses. And
fascinating.
it's the same thing. I never thought of it. And they're in the church.
Yeah.
But it really is the culture changer that we are trying to introduce with this concept of partnered prayer, couples praying together, families praying together, friends praying together. You can go to praystay.com and you'll see information about all of those. You'll see the Baylor data, and you also see a conceptual trailer for the series Pray Stay Challenge at praystay.com. And so what I think is that God brought us together. He had a plan for us to come together. There's no question about that. And he had brought her up in her way. He brought me up in my way. And we're now walking together and having breakfast with God every day.
Yeah, it's amazing how God knows the plan and we can trust him. And it may not happen overnight, but God has brought you both together for such a time as this. It was meant to be right now for this time, to encourage a whole new generation of people that are, engaged, newly married, or somebody who's been married even 45 or 50 years. It's never too late. And that's what I just love about you, is that you are so willing and eager to help other people and to encourage them and point them to the Lord. And you have this incredible platform that God gave both of you before you even met. And then coming together, you're this dynamic duo that's doing so much for the Lord. And it's really an inspiration and an encouragement for all of us that are watching kind of from the sidelines a bit. So speaking of your kind of your backgrounds, I would love to know a little bit. How did you find yourselves in this specific area of being an impressionist and a comedian, and now the author and your speaker, and then for you, SQuire, as well, like how you found yourself in the networks? And so maybe just share a little bit about both of you, your perspective.
They're all Godwinks. When you pull back on the lens, I mean, you live your life forward, but you really understand it backwards. When you look back and you see where something happened, the right time, the right place, the right person, you say, oh, that was a Godwink. I mean, I'm glad we have a name for it, Godwink. But it is it's a divine alignment. It's like we're all on a GPS, God's positioning system. And, he says, in all your ways, acknowledge me and I'll direct your steps. So when we acknowledge him, he will take us on that path he needs us to go. And along the way, we'll see those signposts, those Godwinks along the way that says, keep going, you're on the right path. Well, when I was a kid growing up, and I grew up in a very Italian Catholic household, my mother, very Italian. Riccadello. And she would say to, she would always say to me and my brother, children should be seen and not heard. I guess she heard that and I took it to heart. My brother became a stutterer. And I was painfully shy, and I would escape becoming other people. I'd listen to other people and I would pretend I was someone else. And then I found that I had this talent to imitate people. And I had a low voice as a child, and I could imitate my friends' mothers. And I'm ashamed to even share this, but I must. And I would call up the nurse's office and I would like, hi, this is Mrs. Weinstein. Bernie can't come to school today. He's got menopause, And so I would imitate. So I now have a lot of friends. So they were kind of encouraging me. So years later, I'm a homemaker in the San Fernando Valley in Woodland Hills, California. And now I know the Lord, but I'm with that, husband who's got issues. Yeah. And so I had all my friends on the street. It was a miracle to begin with. We're all born again Christians.
Wow, that is so cool.
Together. I mean, it was amazing. And all the gals, we'd get together for coffee and prayer and have Bible study. And my husband suddenly leaves me. Okay. And I'm all alone. I'm a homemaker. He was working in advertising. I called the girls over, emergency meeting. Barry left me. Yeah. And they start praying right away. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm horribilizing. I'm going to lose the house. But I've got 2 kids, what am I going to do? And as we were praying, one of my neighbors said, I know this sounds crazy, but all those funny voices you do for us while we're having coffee and everything. What if you went down to one of those comedy clubs and try to do that for a living? Try. Yeah. And I looked at her like they had lost.
You're like, no.
Yeah. I'm going to go to a sleazy comedy club. I'm a housewife. And they bet me $50. I didn't have the guts to do it. So $50 is $50. But that night I went to bed and the Holy Spirit kept working in my heart. I just kept hearing this from the Lord, just very simple. What have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? And I thought, okay, what do I have to lose?
Like, okay, let's do it.
I drove down to the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard. It was open mic night. It was one night a week where
that makes my heart race right now.
Oh yeah, right. Believe me, I get in line and I'm thinking, Jesus, this will be a good time for the rapture. I mean, it's like, please don't have me go up on that stage. And then they call me up. And I start doing my little, Joan Rivers, can we talk here? Saying, Sandy, we love Joan. I did like a little bit of Cher. Woo! Yeah. I did some Judge Judy. I did a little George Burns.
Oh, that's good.
Did some George Burns.
Oh, I love it.
And I think I did Katharine Hepburn and a few other people.
How about Cher?
I just did Cher.
Oh,
Carol Burnett. Did you do Carol
Burnett? Yeah. So unbeknownst to me, Star Search Scouts were in the audience. Star Search Scouts in those days was it's like, America's Got Talent.
Yeah. And American Idol.
And American Idol.
Yeah.
They saw me. They were there to see these other comics that were on after the would-be comics, the real comics. And they saw me and they put me on the show.
That's amazing.
And Donna Summer, the diva of disco, was switching the channels. And here's the Godwink. She sees this girl doing these wacky voices.
Wow.
And she calls her manager and she says, get me that girl to be my opening act. And that's how my career started.
That's incredible. Can you imagine if you'd said no?
Exactly.
I don't feel like it. I don't have the nerve. I can't do this. But you know what?
Yeah.
Listen to that soft, that voice. And that was the word working in you.
Yes.
And you were great.
Yes. Yeah. And also, I would encourage anyone out there who's watching or listening, get out of your comfort zone.
Amen.
That's where God does some of his best work.
Yes, it does.
And you have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
No, you did it. I'm just so proud of you. Way to go. A mom, 2 kids, and you took a risk and God knew. And you said,
it changed my whole career.
Yeah.
I had a career. Yeah, and everything. I mean, I started getting HBO specials, Showtime specials. I mean, it was like the Lord just opened up the windows and the doors, everything.
Yeah.
And it was just that timing was comedy was king in those days too,
Oh, yeah.
stand-up comedy. So
Yeah.
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 Great.
Wow.
That
What
was
about you,
wonderful.
Squire? What about you? How did you get
Well,
into this crazy, wonderful industry?
well, actually, we had dinner the other night with a lady who we had dinner with 25 years ago. And at dinner, I said, I want to thank you
Hmm.
because you asked a question 25 years ago. It was a question like any other question that I've had, but you asked it in a certain kind of way, and it forced an awareness of what became my first Godwink.
Hmm.
And I
Interesting.
didn't know it at the time.
No.
But anyway, when I was a kid, I fell in love with radio.
Hmm.
I listened to the radio, and I found that by after sunset and before sunrise, there is the bounce of the radio signals that you can get far away stations.
Wow.
Hundreds of miles, they will bounce, and you'll be able to listen to faraway stations. So I would be up in my room and I would be listening late at night and early in the morning. And in the morning, there was this guy by the name of Dean Harris at a radio station, long, many miles away. And he would always say, "March around the breakfast table," and he would play the music, and he did that every single day. And I would love to mimic him, but mainly to drive my older brother crazy. I'd come down to breakfast and I'd say, "March around the breakfast table." The Wheaties box would come flying at me. Well, I got a chance to go to a radio station, and I didn't know it at the time, but I found out later it was the station where Dean Harris worked.
Well, that's the
On the
Godwink.
air in the morning. I never
Wow.
put that together.
Yeah.
I went to a radio station, and so I would come. I just was fascinated with that. So I came home and I took a hacksaw and I took one of my mother's old brooms and I cut off the end of the broom handle, and now I had a microphone. And I would talk into my microphone to drive my older brother crazy. And so anyway, at the age of 14, I had talked into that sawn off blue broom handle for about 4 years. And I had gotten a job interview at the biggest TV station in the North Country.
Wow.
It was WWNY in Watertown, New York, which you could hear in Ontario. A lot of people watch that station in Ontario. Again, it was only like 20-25 miles from the border. And so I got a job interview with the top dog. I don't know how I did. I just don't remember. But anyway, there I was hitchhiking on a country road in the summertime on my way to this job interview.
Wow.
It was my only means of transportation, but it was relatively safe in those days. And
In those
besides,
days, yes.
then the only thing that passed me were a couple of hay balers and manure spreaders and all kinds of farm utensils. And so I was getting worried. I think my faith was being tested. And I don't know if I said a prayer. This may have been one of those, unstated prayers that Garth Brooks sang about. But all of a sudden, I saw something shimmering down the road. In the summertime, the road looks like water in it, but it's a mirage. Anyway, it was a shimmering green blob coming toward me. And it turned out to be a Volkswagen. And it pulled over to the side of the road. And I jumped in, and this balding man asked me where I was going. I told him not only where I was going up to Watertown, but I was on my way to see the head of television and radio, Jim Higgins. Well, I came up for air, and he stuck out a hand, and he said, "Well, you tell that fella that you're going to see that I said hello. He's a friend of mine."
Oh, come on.
He said, "My name is Dean Harris." Dean Harris, march around the breakfast table. Dean Harris, my hero.
Really?
I was picked up on a lonely road thinking I wasn't going to be able to get to that job interview. when my faith was restored by
Wow.
a divinely aligned Volkswagen that stopped to pick me up.
Yeah.
My hero drove me to my first big job interview.
Started your whole career.
And I
That
got the job.
is incredible.
I got the job.
And you
And
got the
that
job.
started my career. And when that lady asked me the question years and years and years later,
Right.
not just how did you get started in radio and television,
Mm-hmm.
what was the first job you had that started you into the world of television and radio? My mind went to that Volkswagen.
Right. Of course.
And suddenly I connected the dots. That was my first Godwink.
Wow.
That was a Godwink that I had forgotten all about. And much like all of us, we have Godwinks all the time. We just forget about them. We say, put a piece of paper on the refrigerator door or ledger or have a whatever. Just write down every Godwink that you get. And for 2 weeks, you will find that you have had amazing Godwinks during that period of time.
Wow. I love how you just said that writing down, because I was just listening to a podcast today of the couple that little hometown, they do renovations of small home. So they're an amazing couple. And so she was talking about even when there's nothing good going on every day for a period of years, I think it was 8 years, she wrote down something good, just something good. And it's such a good reminder that you said, Squire, about writing things down. And I love to journal. I love to write things down. And I find that my life can be a lot drier when I'm not writing things down, because I'm not reflecting and not thinking on the goodness of God or gratitude. So what a great encouragement for people to just write down something that you had seen God do, because there's always something, always something.
Yeah. And we often say to people, if you have written it down, it makes it easier to do what I'm suggesting, to do an archaeological dig into yourself, into your past. If you go back and sit down one day and have a pad and paper in front of you and just let your mind go to all of those times when it was a heartache or when it was joy, when you moved, when you got something that you didn't have, when you lost something, all of those moments in life. Think about, was there a Godwink there? Was there one of those things that we're talking about right now, a coincidence that isn't a coincidence? And you will suddenly find that at most of those crossroads, God had signage there for you, or he was messaging you and you didn't know it because you hadn't learned to see the Godwinks.
Yes.
Key.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So important. I mean, he's always talking to us, and it's like that. You were talking about the radio station, you have the tower. The closer you get to that tower where the radio station is, the clearer the voice comes. Like you would maybe get a little bit of the static, but the closer you get to that tower, well, that's who Christ is for us. He is the tower. The closer we get to him, and the more we can hear him, the clarity that he gives us. And he so wants to talk to us. He loves, this is what people will say sometimes, well, I don't want to bother him. It's like, oh my gosh, he hangs on every word. That's all he wants. He wants us to communicate with him all the time. He's such a loving father. And we often say like Godwinks, or like when you're sitting at the big table, and a loving, as a kid, a loving grandmother or grandpa's there, and they lean over and they give you a little wink, and you didn't ask what that meant. It meant, hey kid, I'm thinking about you. That's what a Godwink is. Out of 8 billion people on the planet, it's a special communication just for you as his child, saying, I'm thinking about you right now.
It's a personal thing. It's
how special is that?
It is so beautiful. And that's what I love about a relationship with Jesus, because it's personal and he speaks to us, and we have the word of God to learn all about the character of God. And what are we waiting for? So what you are doing is such an encouragement. And I would love it if you would maybe share one last thing before we finish off today. How would you encourage that couple today that is just like, I don't know if I can do this with my husband, or I don't know I can do this with my wife? How would you encourage them today just to get into the routine of prayer?
Well, when you get married, it says to have and to hold. Well, if we each would hold each other up above ourselves, It's a win-win situation.
Mm.
And the thing that we find that stops most couples from praying together is pride.
Yeah.
See, it's vulnerable. He wants vulnerability in us.
He wants our heart.
He
right?
wants our heart.
Wants our
Donna
heart.
Summer told me that when her and Bruce, her husband, prayed, she said, we would leave our weapons outside the door and we would go into a sacred place and become spiritually naked. And we would just open our hearts to God and to each other. And that's what made their marriage so strong. And if everyone did that, you know, because having Christ, yeah, right, having Christ in the center, it's like we often say we see him in our spiritual eye with one arm around Squire, one arm around me. That's Jesus. And how he's just holding us so close to
right
him.
in the middle, you know?
Right in the middle. Right in the middle.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Well, you know, I would say there was a little show that we did called Everything I Know About Wrecking Relationships. I learned in my last marriage. and so we got to know, I had 3, so she had 2. And so we have learned in this marriage what to do right.
Yes.
What we learned from those experiences, we learned what to do wrong. And so there are so many things that if I were sitting down with a group of guys now that were newlyweds and they were just starting out and they're still feeling they love their wife and they but there are things that they're concerned about, you know, maybe the kids are taking too much of the attention. Maybe there's too quick to argue, you know, and then pretty soon you start, you know, making lists in your mind, I do all of this and you know, she only does this, you know, and once we start doing that, we are doomed. Our marriage is going down the tubes and we better get off that track because we have to be on a track where there are no scores. We don't keep scores.
Love keeps no record of wrong, right? So
that's right.
We can't keep records.
That's it. You don't try to win. You don't try to win an argument. You don't try to win a point of view. You just don't get off of that. You should not win because when you try to win, you will lose.
That's true.
What you'll lose is the marriage. You'll lose the trust. You'll lose the ability to communicate with each other. And so therefore, what you need to do is to always let your partner win. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be namby-pamby and so on and so forth. But I can tell you honestly, in 25 years, and having been an expert in arguments before, so I know what they look like and sound like, and you know, 10 minutes later, you try to figure out what the heck started this thing. We forgot what we were arguing about.
Right.
Is that in 25 years, I have never had an argument with my wife.
Wow.
We have
disagreements.
We have disagreements on philosophy or the way to say something. We write together. So, you know, we buffer each other, but it is never to win.
No.
I am ready. I am so ready to lose the argument because I want to win the continuity of the marriage. And so, like Louise said earlier, to have and to hold. I never knew what that meant. I thought maybe it was hugging, to have and to hug. Well, I think what God meant by that, or whoever wrote that, meant to hold higher than yourself, to hold up, to hold higher than you. And so if my wife is always higher than me, it's like working for the CEO at ABC. He had the higher power. He sat at a higher seat. He made more money. I looked up to him.
Right.
My wife is whom I hold higher than me. She's the CEO. And so if she does the same thing to me, then we are both trying to hold each other higher. And so that kind of an attitude, I think, is just so tremendously important.
Yeah.
It's a
So you
game
never
changer.
try to win
Yeah.
because that leads you to lose.
Yeah.
And you always
Yeah.
hold higher than yourself.
Yeah.
Such great advice, such good encouragement. And I 100% agree with both of you when you lift each other up like that and you're thinking of others first and selfless. It
Mm.
really is a game changer. And that filters into our parenting,
Yeah.
being our
Yeah.
neighbor and a daughter, whatever it would be. It really is
Mhm.
a lifestyle and a chosen
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
of our journey. And I think it's such a great encouragement for us today. I want to thank you so much, Squire and Louise, for being here, for the time that you took to share. I love learning about you. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate it. So thank you for the honor of this conversation.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Sandy. God
Sandy.
bless
A
you.
delight to meet you. Hope to
Yes.
see you
Oh,
again.
I'd love
soon.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Martha's Vineyard.
Yes, live on Martha's Vineyard.
Never been.
Okay.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.